Hello, welcome to Ibec's Courageous Leaders podcast. I'm Danny McCoy, the CEO of Ibec, and I'm delighted to be joined today by the legend that is Denis O'Brien. Today we're going to cover some themes on the new Ibec campaign, Open for Business, which its aim is pretty simple. It's to counter the divisive narrative that's building up in certain parts of our society towards migration in all its forms and to protect the social and economic progress from which Ireland has benefited. So I could think of no better person to cover the themes we're going to do so, like courageous leadership, business as a force for social good, investing in communities, emerging markets, philanthropy, education, all of these topics, creating opportunities. Denis, your career has touched upon all of these, so you're most welcome today.
I've been all over the place, as
you have. Said. Denis, you're a man who's very deeply embedded in Irish business and in Irish society, but also you've got a real global perspective. Are you picking up that there is something afoot within our society in terms of divisiveness on the migration issue?
I think the narrative has changed. There's obviously the protests in O'Connell Street over a year ago. Most recently, then the violence towards the Indian community. I think it was really, really alarming. And unless we nip this in the bud, it can be a very big problem for Ireland. Even on a macro level, if you look at the number of Indian CEOs of the tech bro community, all of them are investors in Ireland. If there is any shift in thinking that Ireland is a racist society, I think it could be really, really serious. And it's something that we need to stamp out immediately. It needs to be an educational campaign. And the government and the Gardaí have to be very decisive with it.
Yeah, and I think, we'd probably both agree the silent majority aren't racist because
Absolutely
we've seen it.
Not,
and I guess that's a behoven on people to come forward and stand up, and hence the word courageous leadership.
Yeah, I think, the business community need to stand up. I know Fergal O'Rourke, who's chairman of the IDA, has spoken about this issue. Frank O'Keefe, who heads up EY, has spoken about this issue, and we need to deal with it, and we need to make sure that we do not allow it to fester in any way.
So just in your career, just in terms of the benefits you've seen from diversity, inclusion, integration in societies, like you've been, an investor in Ireland very firmly, but also in other jurisdictions. What's your own personal strength on this one and belief? Passion.
I think, when I look at employing people, I don't care where they come from. I don't care what education they have. Definitely don't care what religion they are. It's what they can do and what talents they have and how can you maximize those talents. So, over the years we've operated in countries which have been difficult to actually identify talent, but we were very fortunate that we would always send out Irish executives first, and they would find the talent, and then they would nurture them and educate them and train them, and they've been absolutely brilliant. For example, in Haiti today, our entire management team is Haitian. So, I think that is, that with that happening, it just shows you what can be done. And Haiti is a very challenged country, a lot of security problems, gangs, ruling most parts of Port-au-Prince. So obviously, I think everybody has talent. It doesn't matter where they're from, to be honest with you.
And when you say that, you reminded me that a lot of our reputation for integration and reaching out to other societies is done external to Ireland. It's the missionaries and the investment you said. And that brand of Ireland was probably developed outside. Whereas in most recent generations, we seem to have been divided on religious grounds in terms of Catholic, Protestants and the Troubles.
Yeah.
Do you see that we've managed in the generation of the economic recovery the last, 25 years now to actually establish that Ireland is a tolerant society?
I think definitely we are basically fundamentally a tolerant society. And like, over the years, I would have said that probably the greatest ingredient that helped Digicel get licenses in 32 countries was the nuns and priests in Ireland, from Ireland, both Catholic and Protestant, who were missionaries in those countries. So Papua New Guinea, Samoa, Honduras, El Salvador, Jamaica. Many of the people in those countries were educated by Irish priests and nuns. And the work that they did in Africa was profound. And if you look at Ireland from a foreign policy point of view, to get elected to the Security Council, which we have on 2 occasions, maybe 3 occasions, but definitely 2, was because countries voted for Ireland on the back of our reputation. I think the stand that we're making now on Gaza is also equally strong and principled. I think people get confused in the outside of Ireland, whether in the US or Israel, by Ireland supporting a 2-state solution. They think we're attacking the state of Israel, or we're being anti-Semitic, but in reality, we're saying we don't agree with the government of Israel in what they're doing. So I think we need to continue a very principled foreign policy. The work of Irish Aid is just phenomenal, and I've seen it firsthand in Africa in particular. And I think the quality of our representatives now and ambassadors in the US, in Canada, in the UK, all around Europe and the developing world are outstanding people. And we have also ambassadors that are now very commercial. They're political and commercial, and they're diplomatic.
It's very true in that regard. But maybe in terms of take it back into the island of Ireland and just on the business side, what role do you think business could have in safeguarding the social cohesion and the trust, particularly in wider society?
Well, social cohesion is the bedrock of our economy, because if we have any unrest that could potentially happen, like what's happening in the UK, in parts of the UK, it would be extremely damaging from our point of view. I think the business community and your 7,500 members really have a major role in this, in speaking to their politicians, to their local community leaders, and to actually reach out to people that have been victims of xenophobia, and make sure that they understand that they're welcome in Ireland. They come here to work, they raise families, they buy houses, they buy cars, they participate in the community. If you look at some of the athletes that we have now developed through Sport Ireland in all the sporting bodies, it's extraordinary the talent that is coming through because of immigration. So, the benefits across every part of society and every touch point in the country are huge.
Yeah, there's a social dividend that's very,
massive.
very obvious.
Yeah.
So, some of the business leaders wouldn't have the experience you have and the strength that you have in terms of your convictions. What advice would you give to those CEOs currently not speaking up for fear of reputational risk or backlash? What would you encourage people to go for?
See, I think people, go out on a limb, and I think it's the right thing to do if you believe in it. And there are lots of very successful business people in every corner of Ireland that probably could speak out a bit more on these issues and show leadership and show that it's not acceptable. This kind of, it's a small undercurrent of xenophobia. It's like misogynism 10 years ago, which has now been tackled. But xenophobia needs to be tackled in all parts of the community. Particularly, it can be led by the business community.
Maybe just on a bit personal note in terms of this idea of courageous leadership, just what's shaped your kind of moments where you kind of think, maybe independent of your business decisions, where you showed courage and guided your decision making, maybe more than just the economics of it?
Well, I'd have to roll roll back a few years. My mother, well, it was very unusual. She was a unionist living in the south of Ireland. She married a Catholic, and she protested against Reagan. She protested against Putin. She was very pro 2-state Palestine, non-violent, and would always bring us on protest marches. And when I can remember, even when Archbishop Romero was murdered in El Salvador, we were all brought down to the U.S. Embassy. But it was done in a very pacifist way. I suppose, she always said, you got to speak out if you see something that is wrong. So, for the first part of, for the first 20, 30 years of my business life, I didn't have the time to speak out. Now I do more and more speak out on certain issues that are of concern. So, obviously, xenophobia and racism is something, that is absolutely, I abhor it. And, having worked in multicultural societies all over the world, I just don't think Ireland, that represents the Ireland that we want.
And obviously you were very central and obviously the creator of the Digicel Foundation as a mechanism to support communities with your initiatives like the Frontline Defenders and, with Concern or the Special Olympics. Do you think there's a responsibility for other business leaders to maybe create these kind of vehicles?
Well, everybody to their own as such. I think there's a lot of silent, generous people, in Ireland, in the business community. A lot of companies in Ireland are extremely generous to their local communities, whether it's supporting the GAA or their soccer clubs or any sporting initiatives, but also in special needs as well. So, I meet people up from all over Ireland, and they're like, we're a giving society, and the business community is a giving society. Most companies now would have quite a significant budget to spend on local initiatives. So I think that is good. And people give to their means. I mean, that's the most important thing. You give to your means. But, business success or making a profit in a business is a kind of a hollow feeling, because you kind of say, what's next? But if you then say, well, what can I do to make things a bit better in the country that I'm investing in? And if you're making a lot of money, well, then you sleep easier. Then you got to take on some of the bigger issues or the bigger demands and try and fix them.
Now we've lived through a fairly unique 15 years, I guess, since the financial crisis, where interest rates were at or near zero. And so in that context, the shareholder found it difficult to find projects that gave a rate of return. So the kind of stakeholder capitalism was all the rage, and the shareholder was just one other. But when the interest rates went up around 2022, we particularly saw on the state side, there was a fair abandonment, even pre-Trump, of corporates saying, no, the shareholder's back and they're primus inter pares. These kind of social good things are not unimportant, but they're not primary anymore. Do you think that kind of pendulum swing, which is now affecting, would argue, Europe as well, as we see the Green Deal being pushed back, corporate social responsibility, due diligence being cut back, do you worry that we're in a pendulum swing away from that ESG agenda?
Yes, I do. And I think, when you've got a country like Canada and Mark Carney then rowing back on, oil exploration this week or in the last couple of weeks, it's like that is a very big move as such. But I think there's a difference between the multinational corporates that are on the stock exchange and then private companies.
Right.
And say private companies in Ireland or private global companies based out of Ireland. I think the public companies really don't do much in terms of charitable giving at all. They might do some university or something somewhere in the US or whatever. But, impactful, directed, targeted philanthropy is really done by the private sector in Ireland and around the world, really, because, business people want a result, and if somebody comes in and said, well, here's a program that I want you to fund, you're all the time saying, well, if I put in that investment, what am I going to get out of it? And what are your targets? And what is going to be the year 2 target, the year 3 target? And what will be the outcomes that will be expected? So, at a very early stage, I started working with Concern, doing funding projects for them. And they were extraordinary and are extraordinary program managers in delivering. We were building 20 wells in Ethiopia, and they built them on time, on budget. And we went back to see that they were working, and they all were working. And from time to time, then for years, they'd send me a video of them working. So, business people are like directed philanthropy. I want to see the results.
Yeah.
Big corporates, they talk. When I read an annual report of a large multinational company that's on the stock exchange, it's normally bullshit, to be honest with you. It's a section that their public relations people have put together for just to tick the box with the institutions. Now, there are the exceptions. If you take Bill Gates, what he has done, in so many areas, river blindness, malaria, what he's done in Africa with Buffett, they're completely stand out. But it took a business person to do that, to come up with the concept, to design what was needed, and to implement it. So yeah, I think private businesses are probably better at this than public companies.
Yeah, and in fairness to the public company model, that capitalism is a way of creating shareholder value. It obviously has a social license to worry about, but it is subordinate, and probably we ask too much from a single instrument to hit multiple objectives, whereas private companies can take a longer view. The quarterly cycle is obviously a killer for public companies.
Yeah, it is. But if a public company is making 100 million a year and they put 3, 4, 5 million into, particularly if they are drawing those revenues out of poorer countries or developing countries, I think that's a really good thing, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's no doubt it's a good thing, but in this, if you distinguish between what you're describing, which is kind of corporate social responsibility, which de facto is write a check and not worry about, put it in the report, but you don't really care how it's spent within reason. Whereas where I think what you've advanced there, along with the Buffetts and the Gates, is more some kind of corporate social value, where you get involved in the social enterprise. And that actually does distract executive time, to put it, not just the money, not just the cash, but to be involved in the KPIs.
Yes and no, Danny. I know all our CEOs love the work of the foundation. So the guy, we had a Belgian guy on one side running our business in Haiti, and we built 198 schools there. He got involved in that. And we had a whole department, like we'd maybe 15, 20 people, engineers, designers, project managers, we had people who worked full time in that role in building schools. And we just said, hey, we're carving out a certain amount of money every year to build 10 schools. So it's not that complicated, to be honest with you.
Right.
It's, you can build it up over a number of years. And the engagement from our staff and the team on the ground was huge, because they could say, okay, these guys are a bit different. They're not the multinationals who come into a poor country and see what exactly they can extract, whether it's in mining or it's in consumer goods or whatever. They want, we want to do a lasting impact as such.
And just given you are in the philanthropy space, do you see a distinction between philanthropy kind of coming from the individual, so to speak, or a foundation, and that's what we just talked about there, where the actual corporate itself moves away from its core business and reaches out into another social enterprise? Do you see them as distinct?
I would put it all part of the core business.
Yeah.
If you're a consumer company operating in, say, Ghana, you should do something. Yeah. You should find out what is the problem. Is it early education for children? It could be malaria. It could be river blindness. How can you fund projects that actually deliver results? It may be small. If you're going into Ghana as a startup, you might put 50,000 into it. Yeah. But when you're fully fledged and you're making 10 or 20 million, then you might be putting in $500,000 to $1 million a year. So I think it's everybody does something to their means. But I think if you're operating multinational world in the developing world, you better do something.
Yeah.
Because you have a soul otherwise.
Yeah. Well, just on that kind of public-private for a moment, right? So one classic objection to philanthropy is that when the philanthropist comes in and does a project, it actually, the governments can often abdicate themselves from actually producing the policy to feed and house somebody else.
Yep.
So you're somebody who's actually got involved with the governments as well, that you don't just kind of fly in, do the project, get it back in the report. What's your experience been with that kind of true public-private partnership where the state actually does get involved?
Well, we'd never build a school anywhere in Haiti without going into the Department of Education and saying to them, where do you think the needs are for a school?
Right.
And, and get their approval. So we would work very closely with them, and we would build a school. We'd fund the school directly. We'd pay all the bills directly, and we train the teachers. So, President Clinton always said to us, do never go around the government. Work through the government, because as you work with the government, you're building capacity for the future as well. So a lot of these countries cannot afford schools. In Papua New Guinea, struggling, we renovated or built 380 schools, but the government budget just never stretched that far. So the total education budget in Haiti is $200 million a year. So if you take Tala and then the schools, all the schools in Tala, that's probably 200 million.
Yeah.
So the population of Haiti is 14 million people. So you're talking very, very poor countries, and that's why whether it's Heineken or any Coca-Cola and all these companies, they need to invest in these countries the same way as other people do. That's what my view is, anyway.
And with that kind of outreach, going back to the kind of premise of the campaign and the divisiveness that might be developing towards migration in Ireland, do you think that the examples that Irish business have in the kind of domain of where people are coming from can help their range when they actually come to Ireland? Do you think that part of the response here, in terms of what we're struggling with in terms of attitudes, could actually be helped by showing that we've impact in people's original countries?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look what Bono and Geldof did with the Jubilee debt cancellation campaign in 2000 with Anne Pettifor, like that made a profound change to Africa, because suddenly countries then had an opportunity, instead of taking their government budget and paying interest and debt off every year, that they were able to reinvest that money when they got the debt write-off into health and education. That has changed Africa profoundly. But I think Africa is the country with the continent with the greatest opportunity, and could be the next India. And we need to help Africa create jobs, create industries, and maybe help with that expertise as well. Through Irish Aid, there are so many talented people that are retiring early out of IDA. Can we have a program to help 5 or 6 countries with their foreign direct investment strategy? A lot of these poor countries don't have an FDI strategy, and they certainly don't have an agency as good as the IDA. So, I think we can help a lot with these countries. And, if you look at migration, it's because of inequality. African people risking their lives on dinghies to go across the channel, it's because of inequality. They don't have jobs, and they have unbelievable climate change in their countries, and they're trying to get out of Africa. So I think in Europe and the developed world, we need to focus more on Africa in creating jobs. Traditionally, it has been, providing an NGO medical system, an NGO school system, but now we need to help Africa move up a scale and create jobs. Like, if you look at Ireland in 1973, when we came into the European Union, we were in a very, very poor country, but we had a great education system.
Sure.
Africa's education is improving all the time, but we now need to help Africa develop industries. And certainly Africa is a lot closer to Europe than China is. And I think the economics are compelling for manufacturing. It's already starting in Senegal and Gabon and some of these countries, that they are becoming manufacturing bases for low-cost goods. But certainly fast fashion could move to Africa tomorrow.
Yeah. And indeed, we know it but never really articulate it. The time zone is really important, in the sense that, it's a consistent time zone part of the day, because as a globalist like yourself must know that depending where you are in the world, it's kind of dark to phoning somebody. You're phoning them in the middle of the night to make that connectivity. Yeah. Africa is perfect for Europe.
Perfect.
Although our legacy as colonists is not great, I guess.
Well, we were educationists, so we're okay. As Irish people, every African country I've ever been to, you always get a very good welcome. And you always meet, people from Troker, Concern, Goal, and they're all doing extraordinary work. So
you mentioned there about you give to your means, right?
Yeah.
So collectively as a country now, Ireland has got spectacularly wealthy in a very short space of time.
Yeah.
Arguably from intangible assets that could be attributed to other jurisdictions. So there's a new form of colonization where we're perhaps the colonists now. So do you think we are actually given enough when it comes to concern, we railed against Trump and US aid, but I didn't see many Irish people put their hands up to the government to fill in the gap for concern and for Trócaire.
I think it's an interesting argument because our tax policies obviously has led to a huge number of data centers in Ireland, and Google, Meta, Facebook, a lot of international companies, Apple, all of them, book their revenues in Ireland. They frank their transaction effectively in a data center in Ireland. But that means, a country in Africa doesn't get VAT or sales tax or corporations tax. So we're the beneficiary of that, and that is funding kind of 32 billion a year in corporate profits in Ireland, which is a big part of the overall budget, maybe 25, 28%. So we're doing that. In my mind, that's digital colonization. I mean, I probably sounded like an anarchist, not a business person, but I do think there is a good argument for the government to say, okay, let's take, say, 300 or 400 million of that out of that 32 billion and give it to Irish aid and help these countries develop industries, fund executives, retired people from the IDA and other people to help them build an industrial base. And, everybody keeps talking about corruption and all that. There's corruption all over the world, and that is not a reason not to do something. And nowadays, the IMF go into countries and they, straighten out the balance sheets of countries. Like, there's ways of giving money and funding countries where you can have incredible outcomes. So I think Irish aid, the Department of Foreign Affairs, they're probably the best functioning government department in Ireland today. Along with Enterprise Ireland, IDA, I think there are three institutions in this country that are probably the best run. And Ireland Aid deserves more capital, more investment, and more resources.
Yeah, I could agree more. I kind of think we like to be, our history used to be poor and popular. Now we're rich. We still want to be popular.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to be rich and responsible. And,
very much so.
And I think that responsibility, is about resilience as well for not just ourselves and our society, as we're talking about the primary one, but the resilience for the globe in terms of the environmental issues we're dealing with. And so a bit like your education, you can get a big bang for your buck by doing it where people need it most. And so that resilience agenda, which I think is really becoming central negatively in some senses around defense and security, and grids and telecommunications, which you're very familiar with. But there's also that social contract.
Well, I mean, if you look at social partnership, we were the model in Europe. And the first program for national recovery, the work of people like Billy Attlee, Peter McClune, Kieran Mulvey, Bertie Ahern, Charlie Haughey, all these people had a very significant role in creating modern Ireland and creating an economic environment and a model that worked. It was a social partnership. To me, was the thing that really has changed this country, and I'm a great believer in social partnership. I think that is the best contract that we could have as a country. And then when we started this conversation, you spoke, Danny, about social cohesion. That was social cohesion in the making, because everybody suffered in the earlier parts of the program financially, but as the benefits and employment increased and taxation was generated and the country had more budget to spend, there was the benefits for everybody. And that's a proper partnership in my mind.
Yeah. And if you actually look at the history of that, and I better, coming from the Ibec stable, mention people like John Dunn and Turlough O'Sullivan as well.
I'm sorry. I should mention the key role of Ibec and the key Ibec role of Ibec in the National College of Ireland, for example.
Sure.
So I mean, it was those people were the bedrock of how this country changed in the 80s and 90s and where it is today.
And so maybe crafting that in a more modern context, because, I'm in 20 years in Ibec, and some of that legacy was there. And particularly when I took over as CEO, there was the breakdown of social partnership was kind of an outcome of the great financial crash. But what those visionaries actually solved was not so much the wage determination and the complaints about that, is that the actual turnaround was the unemployment issue. But it wasn't just unemployment in
No.
Ireland. It was the fact that people couldn't stay here.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's been reversed. I mean, that's probably
Completely.
right. Now, we have a modern equivalent where there's a frustration of young people in terms of housing and so on that's going on. And unfortunately, they may target the new arrivals to our country in terms
Yeah.
of migration.
Wrongly.
Wrongly, but perhaps there is a different form of social partnership required right now where the problem is not unemployment or immigration, but rather how do we positively turn the migration story into the underpinnings of a better Ireland?
I think certainly it needs to be embraced, and they need, the new immigrants in Ireland need to be recognised and celebrated for what they do every day of the week. Like, I was an investor in the Beacon Hospital for 12 years. More than half our nursing staff came from overseas. Incredibly, unbelievably talented and able people. And made a huge contribution to the hospital and continue to this day. So, all of these new Irish people, have made a profound impact on the country. But I think we need to be very careful because we've had no real planning, industrial planning, infrastructure planning, social planning, housing planning, energy planning for the last 10 years. It's been the lost decade. And I think at this stage we have nearly an emergency. And it's kind of a Lord Beaverbrook moment where we need people, the equivalent of him, to actually lead and change this country. And it's very important that we address all these issues because, we won't have social cohesion if we don't solve housing. And if we don't solve water, we don't solve infrastructure. And that is going to lead to problems very, very quickly in the next couple of years. It could lead to political problems where you will have far-right people emerge as leaders, and we don't want them as a country. But that could happen. They could win 20, 30 seats in the Dáil. Where would we be? So the government has an absolute majority of 20 seats. They need to move so quickly at lightning pace to implement the accelerated infrastructure plans. They need to take the 30 recommendation or the 30 key plans and the 138 sub-actions
Sure.
and implement them very, very quickly. It's up to every minister, every secretary general. And we need to move so quickly, like lightning. Like, we're supposed to have 60% of all the recommendations implemented by the end of 2026. We need new legislation as well. So the legislation bit is the slow bit. It should be the fastest bit with a Dáil majority of 20. So we need to hold the feet of all our leaders, secretary generals particularly, and ministers to the fire to make sure they implement the plan. Like, I think the accelerated infrastructure plan, which was published a couple of weeks ago, is probably the most important plan since Ibec and everybody coming together in the late 80s to do the Programme for National Recovery. So
I think you're right, yeah.
It's just so urgent. Like, I had a cup of coffee this week in London with a friend of mine who runs one of the biggest aircraft leasing companies here. They're moving jobs out of Ireland. Like, they're going to Dubai. So if you take AI, could take maybe reduction of workforce of between 50 and 20%. And if we lose, some of the more mobile companies, LinkedIn or Meta or, Google or whatever, you could see that 32 billion that we're generating in corporation tax go down to 15 or 20.
Sure.
And that would be, a hell of a bed tightening exercise. That would leave less money for social programs and social cohesion. So you could have a spiral as such. So we need to make people accountable. Like, when you have a problem in Ibec with one of your members and you're trying to help them, you bring your people around a table and say, how can we help our member solve this particular problem? But if you have a workforce that only comes to the office 2 days a week, as most civil servants do now only, you can't get anything done. So you have nurses, doctors, Gardaí, firemen, all frontline people working. They're not working remotely. They're working every day, coming to work as such. But then you've Secretary Generals coming for 2 days a week, you'll get nothing done. So, I think Minister Chambers, the Taoiseach, the Taoiseach need to say enough is enough. The Varadkar way of work and giving everybody whatever they want in terms of free time and remote working has to end. And every business person, and they're all members of Ibec that I meet. I went to Japan on the EY Entrepreneur of the Year with 140 business people. It was the only thing we spoke about.
Right.
Everybody's just so pissed off it, they can get nothing done. So we have the accelerated infrastructure development plan.
Action plan, which is a crucial word.
Action.
It is an action plan.
By God, it is action. And to the credit of Sean O'Driscoll, Fergal O'Rourke, and the 4 other people, like they gave up their whole 10 months to put this plan. It's a brilliantly constructed plan. It's simple to understand. It's worth reading. And it's going to transform Ireland if it's allowed to transform the country. But we need to stop this thing of everybody having an opinion, over democratizing every decision, red tape here, approvals everywhere, slowness. I'll give you an example. We're in the solar development business. We had a team working in Ireland and they waited 5 years for a grid connection for 40 megawatts of power. In the meantime, we went to Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and we got 2,700 megawatts in 2 years. So that's just an example of how everything is frozen in Ireland and we need to unfreeze it. But it can be done. Like, we have all the talent, it just needs to be done.
So maybe just to finish up, I mean, that point about social cohesion, and I hear what you say about kind of somewhat of an apartheid about those who have to go out every morning and those who have the luxury perhaps of not doing so, but conscious that social cohesion requires a variety of things going on and the infrastructure mightn't be in the right place or transportation. But these are the problems, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, blaming somebody else like the migrant is a danger here. So seized about bringing all those facts together, what would you say is that glue? I think it sounds like the social partnership, social cohesion in its modern form, perhaps. Because one of the things we're observing, again, ending on this point, is artificial intelligence. There's fear of fear itself at the moment. And it's certainly hitting the impact on the society. The young people feel that the odds in the social contract are stacked against them. When it comes to the job market right now, we're seeing the wage premium for university educated students is diminishing relative to the hard skills that are in demand, like engineering, electrician, plumbing. They appear to be becoming consistent with your good self, heading towards collectivism and a more socialist view of life in terms of decisions from the mayor of New York to the president of Ireland. Do you think there's a new zeitgeist for moving left in Ireland that may actually counteract the right-wing extremism you said you were worried about?
Well, I'm in the centre, to be honest. I'm a centrist. That sounds like a cop-out. But, I would have strong social, strong social beliefs as well. But I'd have strong capitalist beliefs as well. But I know this much. Unless we address the issues very quickly, unless we can get housing solved, unless we can remove the easiness of judicial reviews, and unless we can remove red tape, the country has a problem.
Yeah.
Your members have a problem. And it's on everybody's minds at the moment. Every business person, every business owner that I talk to, it's on their minds. Either they want to build more space for their factory, they can't get a connection for electricity, can't get water, can't get planning permission. It is curtailing investment, and we need investment more and more. And the more we can diversify, there's huge positive foreign direct investment, but we need to make sure our indigenous companies also flourish. And, one of the things that I've been advocating is that if we can somehow give an equity release to business owners instead of them selling their business. So if you have a business, say, in Kilkenny, and you're making 5 million a year and it's worth 50 million, and you're going to sell your business because you've actually no cash yourself, you probably have a mortgage and everything is in the business. There should be a fund in Ireland which will buy 10 or 15%, where the entrepreneur, business owner can take money off the table and settle themselves and pay off their mortgage, and then they can they'll absolutely thrive, and it'll become a 500 million euro company. And we need creative thinking around that. Like ISIF has been a great success, a wonderful success. We just need to probably fund ISIF a little bit more to do this. So, but we need to diversify our economy. We're too dependent on one group of data center FDI users, and we just need to diversify the economy. And that can be done, over a period of 3 to 5 years.
Denis, thank you. F. Scott Fitzgerald said a first-class mind can keep two competing ideologies in the head at one time. So both the socialist and capitalist in you was perfectly aligned there in that final reply. Denis, thank you so much for joining us. And for our listeners, just to remind you that Open for Business, the Ibec campaign to really tackle some of the very diverse and divisive narratives that are coming through in our society, is that campaign will provide business leaders with the tools to be courageous leaders, just like you've been, Denis. Thank you for joining us.
I think it's a great program and a great initiative by Ibec, because you're tackling a huge chestnut issue and a very serious issue for Ireland at this time.
Thanks, Denis.